Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. The camera seems to be there. Just one second. Just gonna. Hey everybody, how's it going? The camera seems to be weird right now. Just one second. The camera seems to be there. Just one second. One second. Just gonna. Hey everybody, how's it going? The camera seems to be weird right now. Just one second. The camera seems to be. The camera seems to be a little bit weird tonight. We're gonna see what's happening here. There we go. Okay, I just had to restart my OBS. Sorry about that, guys. So I hope everyone's doing really well. Tonight, obviously, we're going to be talking about Michael Brooks. Other things as well. But, we'll take questions as we often do. But I really want to start... with that. I mean, a lot of people, again, as I noted in my really brief video on Michael, I didn't know him super, super well, of course, compared to so many people here on LeftTube. Obviously, the people that worked with him on TMBS and the Majority Report, all of those folks, right? They knew him the best, but even others that got to collaborate with him more frequently or that have been on the YouTube space longer, all of those folks, knew him better than I did, right? But, we had some brief interactions. Again, I was on his show once, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, in addition to my own, concern on the topic, interest in the topic, how I can't remember the last time I've been this invested in someone passing away that I didn't really know that well. Obviously, you have family and friends and people that are very close to you, but Michael is somebody that I sort of knew through activism, through these spaces, and nonetheless, I'm deeply, moved, right? I'm deeply moved by what happened. And I know a lot of you found me through going on Michael's show. People have told me that before, not just, especially since his passing, but, people told me that, when you went on Michael Brooks, I subscribed and then I became a regular viewer. And now, a lot of you who come to the stream found me that way, or a lot of you who have become patrons and channel members and have helped to really build and sustain the channel, I found because you guys saw me on Michael Brooks and you're like, Michael Brooks is a good judge of character, a good judge of who's an important voice to follow on the left. I'm going to join Christo's channel. I'm going to follow Christo's channel. And so I know for a lot of you, he really mattered. A lot of comments here. Samantha Sider, thank you for the support, Samantha, says, after the death of Michael, I felt bad that I never told him thanks for all he did during one of the streams. Thanks, Christo and Brianna. I appreciate you. Samantha, thank you so much for that. We appreciate all of you who watch the streams, who watch the videos, those of you who are here every week, especially those who, are here whenever they can be, especially. We appreciate you as well. And I think that's one of the things that Michael taught us, but also this moment teaches us, right? There were few nicer people on the left. There's lots of nice people. Mike from Humanist Report's really nice. David Dole, super nice guy. But Michael Brooks was really nice, and he was really good at building bridges. He had disagreements with people, but he wasn't a sectarian. He wasn't a sectarian among the left in terms of, here's who I'm going to build alliances with. Here's who I'm going to have discourse with. Here's who I'm going to try and bring into the circle, into the family. And I think that's a valuable skill set and a valuable principle. Now, that isn't to say that you can't have fundamental disagreements, and that isn't to say that there should be no boundaries to what is the left. For example, Donald Trump is not the left. Joe Biden is not the left. But, we can have these good faith debates while being a family still. And I think Michael Brooks says somebody maybe more than almost anybody else built these bridges in his show. You know, his show, so international, one of the few YouTube shows that talked about Latin America and Africa and Asia and the United States and Canada. He did talk about Canada, at least from time to time, in a way that very few other people did. In a way few others did. And so, you know, that's like a living example. And so, and in addition, just the fact that, like, and this sounds like cliche, it sounds like something you might read on like a Hallmark card or something, but it's like the way people have acted in the last couple days, often people that don't get along on the left, we've been a little bit more friendly to one another. And cynically, that's probably going to go away in a couple days. But, like, I think everyone sort of rallied around the fact that Michael was a great guy, that he did great work, that he was, as much as he was loved and known, the man was trending across the U.S. and Canada on Twitter when he passed away, which is something I wouldn't have expected from a YouTube left commentator, frankly. And that's not to say, but, like, we still underappreciated him. As much as he was appreciated, we underappreciated. And I think that, you know, we should carry forward that respect for one another, letting each other know that we love one another, that we care for one another, letting each other know that we appreciate the work we do, that you know, telling people they've done a good job from time to time, doing these things, one, because it builds solidarity and compassion and a positive environment, but two, as Samantha noted, you never necessarily know when you're going to be able to say it if you don't say it now. Right? Like David Dole had a very personal remark on Twitter where he said, like, you know, Michael reached out to me and, you know, I didn't reach out as quickly as I would like, and now I have this feeling. And there's nothing wrong with that. No one's a bad person for that. But it tells you that it's like there are these moments where we could build communities together. And as much as is possible, you know, everything's crazy right now, obviously. As much as is possible, we should do that work. We should do that work together, right? You know, somebody who linked so many bridges, who, you know, would interview academics on the one hand and then politicians on the other. Somebody, people are noting, or somebody noted here. Aaron says here, his impression of Sam Cedar, Dave Rubin, Sam Harris were great. All the other impressions. Somebody who could interview comedic voices, but also, you know, like, do really serious analysis. Somebody who could talk about hard-nosed, like, investigative journalism, but then also do, like, theory. And there are very few people that can do all of that. There's lots of people that can do, you know, do one thing, but there are very few people that can do it all. And he was one of those folks. He was really one of those folks. John Bartlett says, hey, how are you, man? I almost didn't believe the news about Michael when I first heard about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a surprise to everyone. John, thank you so much for the support. I think it was a real surprise to everyone, honestly, because, you know, there really was this sense that, you know, he was fine, and I don't think this had any connection to any previous issue health-wise for Michael, and you know, no one seemed to know. And the only reason I did believe it personally, the only person I did believe it really was that there's a lot of people hinting at something, right? I know that the Majority Report ended earlier that day, and then some of the people close to Michael in the Majority Report community, but also some other folks just on social media that I knew were close to him were making, you know, just posting that they were devastated. And so, you know, I had a feeling something was up. And so when that dropped, I knew, like, you know what I mean? I didn't, like, it wasn't a surprise anymore because all the dots were connected. But yeah, for a lot of people, they were shocked. And actually, when I posted my video, I mean, I wasn't late, but I posted it a few hours after the story broke, like, you know, 3 hours or so. And, you know, I kind of hinted, I'm like, most of you know by now, but a good chunk of the comments were like, I hadn't heard. Like, if you weren't on Twitter necessarily, you might not have heard right away, because it was really only on Twitter at first. And then it sort of went, and mainstream news in some cases covered it. So yeah, a lot of people were very shocked. Bob Sawin, Bob, let me know if I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't. Keep doing you, my man. Bob, thank you so much. Thank you for the support. We'll certainly keep doing what we do on this channel, but frankly, I do want to take examples from Michael a little bit. I mean, I should do more international coverage, at least to the extent that I can do it justice, you know, like, to the extent that I can't read certain language sources, I'm wary of covering things, you know, things like that. But, like, I should do more, and certainly more networking. More networking on the left, for so many reasons, is necessary, right? We need to network more because, you know, there's this reality that, like, we have all these audiences. They don't always believe the same thing, and my audience isn't the exact same as Cal Kolinski's audience. His audience is much bigger, but it's also probably got different demographics, at least slightly, and like, but they probably have a broad vision. And by working together and collaborating together, we can build audiences and build shared communities. And again, that's one of the reasons, at least some of you are here, as I've noted, is I went on Michael Brooks' show because we were talking about the North American left in the run-up to the election. And it was a great interview. And then that built that link between his community and my community, right? I mean, I'm sure that I must have only brought him but at that point, maybe a few subscribers joined him because I was on the show. But for me, it helped drive new audiences. And I think that that's very important. And as a lot of people have been noting, you know, with political content that covers major news figures that competes with the networks, YouTube is, you know, not suppressed as much as they've sort of given algorithmic advantages to the networks, and it makes it hard to grow organically on YouTube. And so I think one of the things we need to do is collaborate more, right? For all those people who cover Biden and Trump and formal electoral politics from the left, there needs to be more collaboration. You know, someone like Michael did that. Like, he did that with names bigger than him, smaller than him, often much smaller than him. Again, and Ben Dixon noted the same thing, that when Ben Dixon first did a show with Michael Brooks, he had less than 3,000 Twitter followers and less than 3,000 YouTube subscribers. And now Ben Dixon, I'm not sure what his YouTube is at. I mean, I'm a subscriber, but I know he's above 100,000 on Twitter. And I mean, you know, Michael Brooks isn't the only reason, but, you know, the reason why maybe Ben Dixon was able to build that audience that allowed him to expose Michael Bloomberg and help make a difference was because early on, more established names like Michael Brooks gave him a bit of a spark in his audience. And these are the things that you don't always remember, but that are very real. And we have to do that work because no one's going to do it for us. MSNBC is not going to do it for us. CBC is not going to do it for us. The algorithm, more often than not, isn't going to do it. So we got to do it ourselves. Joseph says, Chuck Todd. No, seriously, chuck him somewhere. For those who don't know, he's referring to the Chuck Todd story where he's doing that thing the media does where they like to pretend that when Trump acts like a human being for like one day, they start referring to him as like a very presidential, serious man. So Trump, I guess, said something where masks are maybe okay now. And so Chuck Todd is like, oh, the president's turned a corner and he's much more presidential and serious. And it's like, look, I made fun of journalists doing this back in 2017, right? But like, look, maybe Trump could have been sat down after he won the election and they said, Mr. Trump, you gotta smarten up. You can't just be a Twitter troll anymore. You're president. And it didn't happen, but maybe you could be optimistic and believe. Now, anybody thinking that Trump is just gonna like all of a sudden become presidential is lying to themselves. And when you're in a position like Chuck Todd, you're lying to your audience. Yeah, and so rightfully so, people are calling him out on social media right now. Yeah, a lot of people are saying to buy Michael's book. Actually, let me bring this up. I'm gonna bring this up. Michael Brooks' book. He just released a book, which is something I think a lot of us would be interested in. Let me bring this up here. I believe this is the publisher. You could buy it from Amazon and stuff, but just as praxis, I'm not going to not linked to Amazon if we have to. Go buy his book, read his book. Somebody in my Discord, actually, before I forget, I'm going to link my Discord for some of the folks that haven't seen it. Some people were saying, what we should do is request the book be in your library. If you have a university library or a public library in your community, often you can go on the website and request a book, and that helps the librarians, flesh out which books they're going to order that season or month or whatever the cycle is. And getting Michael's books in libraries is really good too, right? So, because, libraries are awesome, and, they're accessible, and, you don't need money. So buy Michael's book, get it in libraries. I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet. I definitely will. It's very affordable. Apparently, looking here at the web, I'm assuming these are American prices for Canadian friends. But it looks like it's like $12 American. That's a very affordable book. Yeah, definitely read it. Some people are saying, I hope the Michael Brooks show can continue on in some form. Who said that? Samantha said, did Samantha say that? Yeah, right here. Yeah, Samantha said, I really hope TMBS continues on without Michael. Matt and David were pretty good, and I know they will carry on his mission. Yeah, I don't know what their plans are, and I've said it. David and I follow each other on Twitter, and I sent him a quick note just, expressing, condolences and solidarity, and I said, if he needs anything, to get in touch. But yeah, David and Matt again. Matt didn't monopolize his own camera. His technical staff, the guys that were making the show happen, in the nitty gritty ways. Michael allowed them, probably made them contribute because he knew they had things to say and perspectives to add, and I think that's another tribute to him. And I don't know if the show will continue on in the same format. Michael had his own expertise and interests and drive, and David and the rest of the team might have different priorities and how they would approach it. So, I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I would like to think that if they do continue, that the existing audience gives the TMBS team a chance to continue on the show and build Michael's legacy. With a mixture of the new ideas that the new team has, but also, with rooted in what Michael did. And I think if you could find that sweet spot, which I think they could do, then the show could be greater and maybe even over time become greater than it is now, which, would be fantastic. Doug noted that Michael Brooks' sister is going to start a foundation. There seems to be a lot that they're working on there, at least behind the scenes, which again is fantastic. His family, his friends, his colleagues. I think what they've said, they did a stream. They did a Majority Report full episode dedicated to him. And then David and the team and his sister did a stream on the TMBS channel specifically. All of these should be up, I believe. And I think they said that next Tuesday, 5 days from now, basically 6 days from now, they're going to do a formal on the TMBS remembrance stream to Michael. Beyond that, I'm not sure what the plan is, but I I think that that's going to be the goal. Well, I mean, Stephen Colbert said if Christo died, the show couldn't continue. Couldn't continue with just Brie and Smokey. Well, I think it could. I think it could. I think that Brianna would like to do it. Maybe. I think that Smokey might be less willing. He might drive a hard bargain in his contract, but I think he might be interested. I think that. Yeah, I don't know. But with Michael, I don't know. I don't know what would happen. I think that in some ways, the team there knows how to run a channel, at least technically, right? Because they did a lot of that work. Like, I remember Mike asking Michael a technical question once because I was new, and he's like, I don't do that stuff. Like, so he didn't. So I'm guessing like that's a lot of that's done behind the scenes. And like again, David and the team, they have ideas, so I'm willing to give them a shot. And I hope others do too. I mean, I watch Michael's stuff, but I wouldn't say I was like a daily, every single day watcher. So I hope the core audience sticks around. Dude Man says, Michael was my hero, man. We need to pick up the torch on an international scale. Got to read theory and do what we can in our communities. Yeah, I mean that's the Michael trifecta, right? Local involvement, international viewpoints and context, read your theory, right? Like have that theoretical grounding, not necessarily just Marx Engels, the 1800s canon, but like, get a theoretical understanding of the world, an investment in your local community, and a global perspective. I really do think that was the thing that gave him his perspective. John Bartlett says, hey, with Kanye's crazy rant, should we feel bad for him or should we not? Would like your take. That's a tough one. I sort of feel like I feel bad for Kanye in some ways and not in others. In some ways, the guy brings it on himself in some ways. It seems like in others that like he's been offered help to help him deal with some of his struggles. And he's rejected it in some cases. Some of his viewpoints are maybe driven by his mental health issues, but then some of his ideological and political positions, like they're just wrong and they're harmful. Like his position on a woman's right to choose is wrong. And you could say, oh, is that driven by mental health? Well, no, because there's lots of people who have mental health issues and still respect the fundamental human rights of women. I feel bad for him in a sense. But I also think he's wrong in a lot of ways and think that, he's had opportunities to deal with some of these issues and he's not seized it. So, yeah, I think you should feel a little bit bad for him, but, like, you shouldn't lose sleep over Kanye either. Alexander, yeah. I mean, some people were noting that Michael wasn't feeling well on one of his streams, but I mean, I don't want to speculate, guys, because I mean that could be anything, right? That could be related to what happened, or it could be like he was just not feeling well, right? Like, there are days I don't feel well, right? And that could be nothing, or it could be something worse, but we don't know. And so I don't want to speculate. But you're right. I mean, it happened all suddenly, and the fact that like people are trying to grasp for like a reason, right? And that's like one of the sad things here is like there's not like it just bad stuff happens sometimes to good people, to great people, right? Henry Kissinger is still alive, and yet we lost Michael Brooks before his 40th birthday, right? Like the universe is not always just. The universe is not always just. Kevin says Kanye is mixed manic-ish. Been there, done that. I mean, I'm not an expert on his mental health. I know he has official medical diagnoses, and I don't want to just say, because like I think some like people have hinted that he has bipolar issues, but I'm not I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, nor am I an expert on Kanye's mental health. But certainly, some of what's happening is driven by Kanye's mental health. Yet some of it might also be driven by Kanye's ego, hubris, the fact that billionaires in general are not always the best people. So that's why I'm like, you probably feel bad for Kanye in some ways, but then, don't lose sleep over it. Look Forward to Life says, Christo, you should make a video of book recommendations maybe every year or whatever, and we can link to it. I like that idea. I think I did do a book video a little bit ago, and I've done them every once in a while. I've done at least twice on a stream. So maybe what I could do is maybe make it a part. The people who always ask are the ones in stream. So maybe every few months I can do a book recommendation part of a stream. Maybe take like the second half of a stream and do some book recommendations. Kevin says that's mainly from my own experience, LOL. Kevin, thanks for that. No, I mean, I get it. And I think a lot of people who struggle with some of the same things Kanye do are torn. Because, again, some of them have said on social media, they've said, look, I go through what that man goes through, or I've gone through it, or I have a spouse or loved one who's done it. And it's no joke. And then others have said, yeah, you're right. But also, when I went through this, I did not act in the, as disrespectfully in some ways as Kanye did, so my sympathy is qualified. Doug says, last week's stream had a book review, make a clip. Yeah, I might make a clip from that, but that was also a little haphazard. If I want to clip it out for wider viewership, I might want to think about who I want to put in, make sure that I hit books I want to talk about, books that I've maybe not talked about before. Also getting a wider breadth of issues. Every one of those books were actually quite similar. And I didn't include any women authors among them, and that's something I should do better on. I should try to, not reinforce stereotypes about who writes about the left and things like that. So if I'm going to be more thoughtful about it, I think before I want to clip something. Sinistoria says, we should come up with a Christo reading list and then shun anyone who hasn't done the whole thing. Well, we're not going to be doing that. We're not going to be doing that. No, we're not going to be doing that. Some of the books I've read are very thick, very long, very dense, very small print. They're books designed for people whose job to read books. They're designed for people whose job it is to read books. Brianna is taking the night off tonight because she has a really long day at work. But she is telling me that I could make a list. Yes to the list, no to the shunning people.
Unless they want to be in my cult.
Brianna says unless they want to join Brianna's cult, in which case shun away. But you may not shun Brianna. I assume. Obviously, yeah. I mean, one thing, if you want a very rudimentary reading list of my historical work, for those who have, go check out my book. Check out my book on Pierre Trudeau. I've mentioned it on the stream before. It should also be available in bookstores and whatnot. Where is it? Right here. If you go to the back of this book, right? I have basically a list, single-spaced, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. About 20 pages of books and or articles that were essential for me to prepare my book. So those are the ones that I've cited in my book. Now, that's going to be heavily on history specific to the topic. It might not include everything I would want you to read, but that could be considered a very rudimentary Christo reading list. John says, did you hear about Trump's comment about the Maxwell chick? It was weird. Yeah, so John, thank you for the comment and for the question. Just before I get to that, Frankie asks, Christo, can you do impressions? Not very well. I don't think I can impersonate anyone, really. I'm certainly not Michael Brooks-esque. Let's just put it that way. So for those who don't know, Ghislaine Maxwell was, I don't even know what to call her, like, legally, because she was Jeffrey Epstein's associate, like, partner, like, love interest, who basically, and now this is allegedly, legally at least, worked with him in his business that, around surrounding young girls, right? Well, Epstein was arrested and then ultimately, took his life, quote unquote, but we all know that he was murdered in prison. She was basically on the run and just a few weeks ago got arrested, and she's awaiting trial and all this and all that, and Trump finally got a question on it. Was it yesterday or the day before, John? And basically said, I'm not following the case, but I wish her well. Like that she was a friend. And everyone really, perked their ears up at that one because, of course, what she's accused of, and what I think most of us believe that she at least partially did, were some of the worst things you can do as a person. Right? Legally, again, she's innocent until proven guilty, but in the court of my mind, like Epstein, she's a monster. Right? She's a monster. And so Trump saying that was just the most absurd thing. Just say no comment. Just say it's a legal case, I can't comment on it. Like, that's BS, and people will still rip you, but you won't get the heat that you got for what you said. Bob says, what might we not consider macroeconomics and Fed policy? I mean, I'm not exactly sure what you're, if you're referring to a specific point there, Bob. But in general, yeah, we should consider these things. Whether it's, in terms of like monetary theory and stuff, talking about, modern monetary theory and how that has a lot of value, but I think there are limits to it. Talking about tax policy, talking about global economics. Yeah, we have to do more of these things sometimes. Yeah, I think we do. Like, I try not to always get bogged down into, like, the theory of monetary theory, because I find sometimes a lot of people will say, oh, we're getting lost in the bushes. We need to think of the forest. We don't need to worry about taxing the rich or anything. Just need monetary theory reform. And I'm not sure if I buy that. I think you need a mixture. I think the ideas of modern monetary theory, that, like, how we approach debt and deficit and spending, is fundamentally broken from, like, an ideological and practical perspective. But, like, still, one of the ways we address our micro and macroeconomic situation is through redistribution of wealth within the current monetary stock and of taxation and things of these sorts. These matters. And insofar as debt does matter, if it does, then the burden of that debt should be borne disproportionately by the rich and wealthy and well-connected. And so, yeah. But I think we need to have more of these discussions. Mickey or Miqui Ramirez just sends a super chat. Thank you so much. I don't see a question there. If that was a mistake, let me know, and I'll be sure to get to your question. But thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, people are talking about Jimmy Dore, who actually I don't watch a whole lot of. I mean, if he didn't mention Michael, I mean, that's a little disappointing, frankly. But I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, or maybe he hasn't gotten around to it. But people are saying he's a great performer, and I think again, that's another thing with Michael. Michael was a great performer too in his own way. I mean, the range that guy had, man, the range. You know, he could sit down and almost it felt like, especially when he was doing his like live streams, kind of just in his like house. You know what I mean? When he would just kind of do his like informal live stream like out of the studio, it would very much be like it's almost like he was just talking to a small group of friends, even though like a couple thousand people might be watching. And then like, you know, he got into these like really interesting discussions there. But then on the other hand, as people have noted, the guy could be uproarious, right? The guy could be telling jokes and playing to the crowd almost like he was doing a comedy show. Not that he wasn't, you know, talking about serious issues, but in terms of his presentation, his stage presence. It's just, yeah. You know? John asks, "Hey, I'm doing a project on convict right to vote. Can you help?" John, thanks for the support again. I mean, I would have to have some specifics before I commit to anything. But yeah, I mean, if you want to drop me a line, I'd be happy to help at least in terms of if you want to pick my brain on the issue. I mean, I think that's a very important topic in the United States. I've talked about this before. Here in Canada, every single Canadian has a right to vote. Every single Canadian. Whether you are in prison, whether you are out, whether you are in for life, whether you are in for white collar crimes or the most heinous crimes, you have the right to vote in Canada. And that's something that the United States doesn't have. We've talked about it in some states, and I think every state but one, I believe, if you're currently incarcerated, you cannot vote. You cannot vote. And in many states, even after you're out, you cannot vote. Like ever again, if you've committed a felony or what have you. That's wrong. That's 100% wrong. And I think that needs to be outlawed in all 50 states. I really do. I really do. Not only is it a matter of basic human rights, no one should ever lose their right to vote, ever. Either temporarily or permanently. There should be no exceptions. I don't care if you were, everyone's like, oh, you want to give the Tsarnaev boy the right to vote. Yeah, give that guy the right to vote. I don't care how monstrous you are. You have the right to vote if you're an American citizen. It shouldn't be any other way. And then it's also connected to race and class, of course. One of the black men, because they of a racist justice system, are therefore disproportionately disenfranchised in a lot of parts of the country. And so that's one of the things I think Bernie did so great on. Bernie was the only one in the Democratic primary that wanted to give every American, no matter what, no matter where, the right to vote. And he was 100% right. 100% right. So, John, I mean, I don't know what your specific project is, but it's something I believe in. It's something I believe in. Yeah, Frankie is saying in Australia, it's illegal not to vote, technically. I don't know what the punishment is. I'm not sure, but I do know that, at least on paper, they have compulsory voting. That doesn't happen in Canada. You have the right to not vote in Canada. Cosmopolitan Lefty asks, are there any documentaries or books dealing with the history of Canada's horrid foreign policy from East Timor to Bolivia? I don't know if there's any documentaries, but there has been some research done on Canada and the Middle East. One I can think of just off the top of my mind is and this might be a good person to look up, is Francis Petty, Now he didn't study. He didn't study. He didn't study those particular countries, but he was an expert in Chile. He was an expert on Chile. Let me drop one of his books. Specifically, he's done some work on Chilean exiles in Canada. People exiled after Pinochet's rise who came to Canada. And I think that might be a good place to look. Let me just do a quick... Let me take a look here. I might have to take a bit more of a specific look. One of the things is, much like American sources, some of the content is basically going to be like Latin America is socialist and evil, and therefore our glorious capitalist government saved liberty for all. And I want to shy away from randomly looking up sources and recommending propaganda. But that's one thing I want to look at. But no, Richard Petty's a good person to look at. Other people that have studied other parts of Latin America, Sean Mills has studied Haiti in particular. And I wonder if you look up these authors, what they might do is they might help you link to wider resources. Another one is Robert Wright has studied Canada and Cuba to some degree. These are all scholars you might look at. Bob asks, not MMT as a policy, simply analyze current Fed actions and their implications, perchance, to see where we're headed. Yeah, I mean, that's something that could certainly be done, but that's also a deep cut for me. I mean, that's a really deep cut. I wonder, in terms of nitty-gritty analyses, I wonder if, that needs somebody who focuses in on that. Because that's whether it's interest rates, whether it's, all these sorts of things, how they're done, what the goals are there controversies, is the Fed acting in contravention of the priorities of working class people, and exactly how does that work? That's something that I'm not necessarily an expert on, and so I wouldn't want to oversell myself, for instance. John says, could you do mandatory voting in the U.S. legally? Right, Robert Wright. I'll find the book. Now, Robert Wright is not necessarily on the left, so keep some of this in mind, but this might be a good book. Let me copy link address. Let me see if I can. There it is. Okay. This is it's a peer-reviewed book, which is very serious. So even if I don't agree, this is a book that you should definitely look at if you want to see that. Okay. John asks, could you do mandatory voting in the U.S. legally? Whew, that's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, right now, you have an issue where not everyone in the United States can vote. Citizens, based on, if they're in prison or if they've committed a felony or what have you, depending on where they are, lose their right to vote. So right now, I think you would have to get rid of all those restrictions first. But I wonder if you could force people. I wonder if someone could make the case that part of my right to free speech and to freedom of thought and conscience is that I reject voting. And as such, I reject the idea and you cannot force me to vote. I wonder if that's allowed. So I wonder if they had mandatory voting, it would be challenged as unconstitutional. And another factor would be indigenous people in the United States who, in a sense, have a complicated relationship with sovereignty in the United States. Much like in Canada, some Indigenous people do not see themselves as Canadians. They see themselves as distinct nations. And so the Canadian state forcing these people who are, I guess, in a sense, Canadian citizens, at least legally, even if they don't see themselves as Canadians, like philosophically, would maybe find issue with being forced to vote. For anyone, let alone a particular party, of course, but being forced to vote. My inkling is that in Canada and the US, a mandatory vote law might get struck down as unconstitutional. It might. Like, it might get struck down. David asks, Hola, Christo, tough question. Do you have a favorite Simpsons character? Who? That's a good question. It is a tough one. I mean, I'm a big fan of the whole show's fantastic, of course. But geez, I don't know. I like Lisa. Lisa's a good character. She's a bit too liberal for me. She's not socialist enough, but Lisa's a good character. I think, the characters played by Phil Hartman were fantastic, just from a comedic perspective. Like Lionel Hutz, Troy McClure, these were fantastic characters. For those who don't know, the actor that played those characters tragically lost his life in the late 90s. His wife took his life. And basically after that, those characters disappeared, and it was as a kid I didn't notice why is there no more Troy McClure and no more Lionel Hutz, and that was why, those were fantastic characters. Also, some great guest characters like Hank Scorpio, which was fantastic. So many great characters in that show. Monty Burns is very good as the stereotype of a capitalist. He's at least partially based on one of the Rockefellers, for his anti-unionism and his cruelty to regular people. John Bartlett says, which TV character voted for Bernie? See, this is a good question because in recent weeks, a lot of people were saying which characters on TV voted for Trump, which characters that you voted for Trump. And there was a big debate around Hank Hill, and we've talked about it on the show, where I don't think Hank Hill's a Trump voter. I just don't see it, especially in 2020, but maybe even in 2016. He almost he gets sworn off Bush because of the handshake. He's voted for Democrats, at least in Texas. He named his dog after the first lady of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the former president and Texan, and he hates people from New York. And Donald Trump is a born and bred New Yorker, and so I thought all of those together would tell me that Hank Hill's a Republican. In general, he's a Republican. He's a middle-aged white man from suburban Texas, small to medium-sized town Texas. Arlen is portrayed sometimes as a small town, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, it's a city of about 100,000 or so people, so it's a small city. And demographically, he's Republican, but I say it would probably be, he probably wouldn't vote for Trump. Now, in terms of who would vote for Bernie, it's a good question. One of the challenges there is that the politics of Bernie are not always represented well on network TV. Right? They're not. Your quote-unquote liberal character is generally devoid of class politics, right? So you might have someone like a Britta on Community, for those who watch Community. Britta's like the activist-y type, but she's not strictly like somebody that you might classify as somebody who's class conscious, right? You wouldn't necessarily say that about her. And so it's hard to find a ton of Bernie characters. See, people say Homer, like Common Internet says Homer, but I don't think so. I don't think so. At 2016, Homer's voting Trump. Remember, Homer was going to vote for Mr. Burns in that election where Mr. Burns wants to run for governor to stop the state from inspecting his nuclear plant. And he runs an election against big government, basically. And Homer buys in hook, line, and sinker. It's Marge and Lisa that support the nondescript Democrat candidate, Mary Bailey, who wins that election. That's from like season 2, I believe, or season 3. Homer is also, he was a union guy, but union members do vote Democrat, but union membership is not as strong a predictor as social conservative issues in some cases. So I don't know. He might have voted for Trump, Homer. I'm not sure. Like Bobby Hill grown up might vote for Bernie. I could see that. I could see, who could, this is really hard because like in a lot of these shows, right? We don't get characters like Bernie. You have like conservative types, you have like disingenuous liberal types, like a Brian Griffin from Family Guy, right? Brian Griffin from Family Guy is like this disingenuous, like liberal that's all about doing it because he thinks it'll impress women or to look smart and look civilized and look sophisticated, but he actually doesn't believe in fundamental equality. There's actually, I'm trying to think, Haley Smith might vote for Bernie from American Dad. She's kind of like, she doesn't fit the stereotype. She fits that Britta-like Community stereotype, but she might still vote for Bernie. I don't know culturally where she would be, but like a Kelly Kapoor from The Office might vote Bernie. Young women of color were very, very likely to support Bernie Sanders. But see, again, I don't know if anyone on that show has class consciousness. Ryan from The Office said he voted for Ralph Nader. He wanted to shake things up. Now, that could mean he would have voted for Bernie as a sort of protest vote. Maybe he's not even ideological about it. He just wanted to vote for something anti-establishment. So he might have voted for Bernie, but then he could have also voted for Trump in 2016. Yeah, Seth MacFarlane was a Bernie supporter in real life. But I think the point was, like, he's making fun of, like, the worst... Because, like, Seth MacFarlane, in that case, was making fun of, like, the worst tendencies he sees in, like, in liberals. That's what Brian Griffin is there for. Sometimes Brian Griffin represents Seth MacFarlane. Like, when Brian is, like, portrayed as well, it's basically Seth MacFarlane's character. Listen to Brian Griffin's voice. It's basically Seth MacFarlane. Like, I don't know how much he changes, if anything, really. So he's often Seth's stand-in. But, like, it's almost like when you want to make fun of him, he'll often make fun of himself through Brian. Sideshow Bob is definitely a Republican. We know this. Would he vote for Trump? I'm not sure. In one sense, you'd think he might be a never-Trump Republican because he's very highly educated. Right? He's very highly educated. And he kind of could be one of these people that like the Lincoln Project types who are like, look, they want to bomb the Middle East. They want to fundamentally deny the human rights of women and LGBTQ people and Muslims and what have you. But they want to do it respectfully. They want to do it while being polished and giving great measured speeches, right? They want to do it with the mask on. And so is that Sideshow Bob? I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, so Kelsey Grammer is 100% a Republican in real life. He really is. But I don't know what his position is on Trump. Well, let's look this up. We're gonna look Kelsey Trump. Okay, so as of this, the first article that comes up from last year, Kelsey Grammer was still a diehard Trump supporter. So you might argue that maybe Sideshow Bob would be as well. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just missing things, but there's not as many Bernie supporters on mainstream television as you might think, because of how often liberals are portrayed in certain ways, right? Like, maybe like some of the people on Roseanne, go back to the, not the crazy transphobic Roseanne of today, but go back to the original Roseanne run. Those people might vote for Bernie Sanders. They might vote for Bernie. You're talking working class whites that are that have some sense of class consciousness. They at least in 2016, those people, if they do vote in primaries, are voting for Bernie. Like, Jackers asked if I would consider doing call-ins. I mean, I would. I'd have to look at the logistics of it all and set it up. Maybe set it up with like where I give Patreons the number. That's something I could certainly look at. I could certainly look into that. Irene says, I grew up in Korea when I was younger. In Korea, you were automatically a registered voter when you turn 18. I really hope America does the same. Irene, thank you for that, and thank you for the support. I mean, I totally agree. I think you should automatically be registered at a certain age, like when you hit the voting age. And ideally, they should start it a year earlier so that, like if you turn 18 right before Election Day, you're not caught in this bubble. Like, you should be registered on your 17th birthday so that you have at least some time before the next election. You have at least a year to figure it out. And if you don't get registered, or if your information is inaccurate, you should be registered. And I think in terms of legality, automatic registration would be far more easy to defend constitutionally than compulsory voting. Because automatic registration, you could argue, it's just for efficiency purposes. And then anybody who, for whatever reason, wants to be unregistered could go ahead and do it. It's sort of like, from my perspective, like, I think it's a good thing to be an organ donor. But I get why, for a lot of religious and cultural reasons, some people can't be organ donors, right? They can't. And I respect that. But I think it makes sense to make organ donation and things like that automatic, right? I think it makes sense to be automatic. And I think in that way, you should have to opt out of voting. In Canada, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how it happens. I can't remember back to when I was 18 or so. But I do know that in Canada, voter registration isn't as important. When you file your taxes, you can click a box that says, yes, send my information to Elections Canada and the elections institution in your province, so that they can have up-to-date information on you, where you live and whatnot. So that the next time there's an election, they can mail you your voting card in the mail. Now, you don't need your voting card to vote. All you need to do to vote is go to a polling station with some form of identification, and we're very flexible with it, and often proof of address in that jurisdiction, and you can vote. You can vote in Canada. There's even ways you can vote without any ID at all. Somebody has to swear they know you. They have to take an oath, like a very solemn oath that they're not lying. But yeah, you could vote in Canada very easily. And you don't have to be registered early. You could have never voted, never ever, and you go to your polling station and you bring, say, a copy of your utilities bill, and you have proof of who you are, they will give you a ballot to vote. They will let you vote. Right? That's the way it should be. 100%. It's the way it should be. John says, I heard Trump is sending federal troops in Chicago. Hope this isn't a Portland type deal. Again, I don't want to speculate without knowing the full story, but I do know Trump has said that basically what's happening in Portland is something he wants to try in other areas. He wants to try to take on these cities. You know, they want a, Trump's argument is the U.S. government wants to keep Americans safe, and democratic cities like Chicago, Portland, whatever, have failed to keep businesses and people safe, and we're going to go over their heads. And so I could see Trump do it. Trump is getting more and more desperate electorally. He knows that, no matter what he does, seemingly, his poll numbers aren't improving. His personal numbers are falling, his personal approval ratings, and, his polling versus Joe Biden. All of that's falling. So, maybe he thinks by creating this discord, he can hopefully, win the culture war, which is why they've spent time talking about statues. And they've spent time talking about Goya beans. They're trying to win a culture war battle to get back into this election. But I think fundamentally the reason Trump is losing is that, he's done a bad job as president. Right? The culture war stuff matters. It does often. But it's not going to matter enough in this election. He's a bad president. He's a bad president. Right? And Biden's not running a great campaign. Biden in some ways is running a better campaign than Hillary, because I don't buy that he actually means any of it. But Biden, unlike Hillary, reached out to Bernie and his team to include them. And so Hillary didn't do that. Biden did. But Biden's not running a good campaign. You guys saw my video. After this, be sure to check out my video I just put up a little bit ago, where Biden basically says that Trump is the first racist president in American history, and I'm not making that up. Here's the link. Go or check it out on the channel after. This was Trump. This was Biden. Biden's not a good candidate, guys. He is not a good candidate. And so he's winning. Trump's losing because of his own failures. Economy's in the tank. People know that he bungled COVID. He's a bad candidate. Yeah, Biden's not a good candidate. I get it. A lot. They did a poll. And it's just one poll, but they did a poll. Something like 2/3 of the people voting for Trump are voting for Trump. But 2/3 of the people voting for Biden are doing it to vote against Trump. Now, ultimately, that doesn't, when the votes are counted, that doesn't matter how you get your votes. Whether they're votes for you or they're votes made against your opponent. A vote is a vote. But it says a lot, about what kind of coalition Biden has built. And I actually do think Biden's going to win. I wasn't convinced a couple months ago. I was still pretty concerned he was going to blow it. He could still blow it, but I do think Biden's going to win because Trump has done just that bad a job. And unlike 2016, where he didn't have a record, an actual political record you could criticize, he's now been president for 4 years. Yeah, So, Peggy, what he said was, Biden said earlier today, and again, check out that video, because I don't know if it's like I didn't keyword it right, or it's like Trump-Biden videos get so much competition, but it didn't get a ton of views. But what it said basically, what Biden said was, lots of people have tried to run for president and have been racists, but this guy is the only one to have actually become president. And he didn't qualify that. He didn't say he's the only one in modern times, or he's the only one in the last 30 years. Even then, I don't think it's true. But we're talking about him being the first racist president, even though, guys, we got to remember, no fewer than 12. The number is anywhere from 12 to 18. No fewer than 12 presidents owned slaves. No fewer than 12. Some of the others, it's disputed whether they did. Some of them, they didn't. Technically, their wives did. Like, they were technically their wives' property, but of course, they still benefit from it. You know, things like that, right? Like that alone. But then you add in Jim Crow, you add in the U.S. foreign policy, which is often racist. And I would say, like, can you name a president that isn't racist? Can you? I don't know. And so Biden, it's such a ridiculous remark. Such a ridiculous remark. Right? Sinistoria saying, didn't Biden tell his donors that he don't expect to finish the term or what have you? I don't know about that. I've heard rumors that Biden is considering like a one term. I don't know if I've heard like a one term pledge. Like he's going to run this time and win or lose, he's not running again in 2024. But I've heard no formal recognition of that. What I've been hearing behind the scenes from a lot of people is a lot of venture capitalist firms and things like that have been a lot of them have been saying, don't expect Biden to actually follow through with what he's been talking about with Bernie Sanders. As if to say, don't worry, guys, he doesn't mean it. Like, yeah, there's going to be some differences between him and Trump. Biden might reverse some of the tax cuts. He might actually end up doing that. I do think Biden's going to work to raise the minimum wage. I think Biden, in that old school sense, has that some of that like labor type support that might get him to raise the minimum wage. So there's going to be some changes for businesses. Like, you know, they'll have to deal with a minimum wage increase most likely, but they'll get over that. Everywhere else that happens, businesses adjust. But, like, I think they're being warned that Biden's going to be a very conventional center-right Democratic president. Very conventional. And I do think he's not running again next time. I do think that. But I don't think he's been telling that even privately to donors. Maybe he's talking about that with his VP. Like, maybe in his VP vetting, part of the discussion is, this is not typical. I know for a fact I'm not running in 4 years. So you have to be ready to basically be a president auditioning for 4 years. Which I didn't have to do, because when Obama knew he was going to run. Obama knew he was going to run. For the second time. Joe Biden knew, and Obama's young and healthy and all that. The guy's still young now, right? And he hasn't been president for 4 years. So Biden knew that he was probably never going to be president via, Obama having to leave or dying or whatever. Biden's vice president does not know that. Biden's much older, in much worse condition. There's a good chance he doesn't run again. Bob says there are no Bernie supporters being vocal, but his policies are and will be used going forward. It's all a game. The history of fiat currency is clear. Yeah, Bernie's policies, in a sense, some of his policies will be used by centrists to build the tent around Biden, but some of those policies will also be used to shift the discourse leftward. And one thing I think is that, and this is cynical, but Obama lied to regular people to get their votes and then sold them out once he became president. But Obama's lies were more right-wing than Biden's lies, showing that at least on a rhetoric level, the Democratic Party knows that it has to lie more left-wing than it did before. If that makes sense to you guys. Before, back in the early 2000s, they didn't even really have to lie to progressives at all. Now they have to lie, like Biden has to actually pretend like he wants to pass pretty good policy. I don't believe him. He might end up doing it out of pressure. He might end up doing it, if the grassroots pushes him on it. But Biden is telling the sorts of lies that Obama didn't feel he had to. Because the left is that much stronger in the Democratic Party, but also in society. Jacker says, can you make some videos on election predictions? I'll probably do some of those things closer to the election, looking at polling and things like that. I found that since the primary, my videos on polling, people haven't really been watching them. It's probably a mixture of people aren't paying too close attention to polling right now because we're so far away from the election. But during the primaries, I did some polling videos. Around the Democratic primary, and people were interested. So, maybe closer to the election, I'll be doing some analyses. I'll do an election, at least one prediction video, before the election, maybe looking at, who's going to win the presidency, who's going to win the House, who's going to win the Senate. Personally, right now, I think the Democrats are going to win the presidency, and it's not even going to be particularly close. I think Biden's going to win pretty healthily. We're talking like similar to Obama's 2008 victory, like that sort of margin. The Democrats are going to hold on to the House. And the Senate, I think the Democrats are going to edge the Senate. I do. I really do. They're going to lose Bob Jones's seat back in Alabama. They're going to lose that back to the Republicans. But they have a chance to make real pickups in many places. Throwing back the apple says, are you ever going to tell us why you have 2 copies of Trudeau-mania? Throwing back, I've said this before, but the reason I have multiple copies of some books are for a few reasons. One is with this Winnipeg 1919 book right here, and with my The Constant Liberal. I mean, I was an author of those books, solo authoring the Trudeau book. But then also I wrote the foreword to the Winnipeg General Strike book. And so when you're an author, they send you complimentary copies. I don't know how many, but they send you like, a dozen or so copies of the book. So you can give it to friends and family and things like that. When you review a book, when you do a book review for a journal, you often do it for free because it's academic journals. They don't have a lot of money to throw around. And when you're in academia, it's considered part of your job to do things like review books. It's part of the package of your labor. And one of the perks, though, is they send you a free copy of the book and you get to keep it. So I reviewed Trudeau-mania for a journal, but then I think I also got a copy from another source. So for some of these books, I have multiple copies. Some of them are also journal series. So for instance, I have Labor Le Travail. Those are journals, but I have double copies of some. I think I have 2 copies of the spring 2016 one because I got one copy because I was a subscriber and another copy because I was an author of one of the pieces, I believe. Yeah, Bob, my bookcase is not at all organized. Yeah, Doug Jones. That's I think what I meant to say. Yeah, Doug Jones, because he's gonna lose that seat. You know, it was a fluke they won. It was a fluke they won that against Roy Moore. But the Republicans are gonna win that back. Yes, I don't even remember what I said, but I meant Doug Jones. Yeah, people are saying Rogan. Ben Shapiro was on Rogan today. I haven't seen it, at least not yet. But I think Hassan on Twitch talked about it. I wouldn't be the Surfs. The Surfs on Twitch. That's right up their alley. They like dedicate themselves to covering like the online right. I'll probably take a look and see if there's anything interesting. But usually I defer to the Surfs and Hassan and those types on that kind of coverage. Dan asks people to watch my video on the Winnipeg General Strike. If you look up Christo Winnipeg General Strike, I have a brief video kind of explaining some of the things I've done there. And yeah, it's a great collection of historical documents from the Winnipeg General Strike. My contribution's very brief. It's just a short little article explaining how the Winnipeg General Strike has evolved within the minds of Canadian historians since 1919. How it's become such an important part of like the legacy of Canadian socialism and of trade unionism over the last 100 years. So, yeah, I mean, people saying that, right? Like Michael Brooks, yeah, the guy could have been in politics. Yeah, Benji saying, Jamie and MR saying, Senator Michael Brooks, imagine. It got me real bad. Yeah, I mean, look, you never know. Would he have wanted that? I don't know. But he had it within him. He had it within him to make a mark in politics, whether it's in a local level or a national level. The guy could have done it. He could have. Right? He had those connections. He had those connections to the grassroots. He obviously had a following that he could have, built volunteers and fundraising out of. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have surprised me. Oh, Bob Jones, yeah. But there's all Bob Jones. But I think Bob Jones is also a right wing evangelical in the States too. I don't know if he's alive anymore. Sorry about that, guys. Doug said that you made a YouTube playlist of Michael Brooks tributes, as well as some select interviews with various lefties like Christo. That's really great, Doug. That's really great. It's good to see people kind of making those connections. And I've seen so many really good, like tributes, like, and again, different in so many ways, right? Because you have the very, very personal tributes of like his colleagues, and then you have people who knew him better than me, and then like tributes like mine were like, just kind of like more professional, because like I didn't know him that well, but like all of them were moving, right? Like even the ones of like, I barely knew Michael, and like people are still losing it, right? And rightfully so. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Emily's like, look, yeah, I mean, I cried too. I did, right? Like, I was able to keep it together somehow on my video. I don't know how I did, but I did it. But yeah, I cried a little bit, and I know lots of people did. I never met him. Like, I never met him in person. I only did one interview with him, and we talked. We would Twitter message sometimes, but that was it. Right? Yeah, Crystal Ball did a really good, there was a really good tribute she did to Michael. So many good tributes. Anna Kasparian on the Young Turks was having a really, I remember when she talked about it, I mean, she was really having a hard time. So many of us really struggled, right? Like, we had a hard time. And, I don't know. it's something that a lot of us really struggled with, right? I don't know. It's hard. I think you get a sense that he meant a lot to a lot of people. Yeah, Peggy, I mean, I think his sister might have said what he passed away from. But yeah, Ray. I think Ray's right that it was a blood clot. It was very sudden, and I don't think it was connected in any way to any other medical conditions, right? So that's why I think everyone was so shocked. His family, his closest colleagues, obviously the rest of us who didn't know him as well. Yeah. Yeah, because I was, because at the time, people saying the Anakin, because at the time when it was announced, the Young Turks was live, right? They were live with just their daily, like I think that's when they're live, like Monday to Friday at that time, like in the mid afternoon, right? And at least here in on the East Coast, and yeah, it was devastating to watch her. I think for a lot of people that really set the tone in some ways, that this meant a lot to people, that it meant a lot to people. Yeah, people are noting the Lula tweet. That's great. That's one of the reasons I put the picture of him and Lula. One, it's one of the pictures I think Michael is happiest in. For those who most of us know, but Lula is the former president of Brazil. Very popular man in Brazil amongst the people. He's a former socialist president. Was recently jailed as a political prisoner under the Bolsonaro regime and prevented from running against Bolsonaro. And likely one of the reasons Bolsonaro became president, or was in prison before the Bolsonaro regime, excuse me, is because he wasn't able to run, and then was released. At least for now. And during that release, Michael went down to Brazil and did an exclusive interview with him, which was fantastic. And then, after his passing, Lula tweeted out, I met this young American journalist. I'm so sad for his passing. And yeah, it was really great to see. And Jane Sanders, I know Jane Sanders, that one got Jane. Let me pull that up because not as many people saw Jane's. Let me see, Jane. They're pulling this up. Let me see if I can find Jane's. Yeah, it's right here. So this was Jane's. I'm gonna link it to you guys so you guys can read it here. But Jane's tweet was really nice. I don't know if Bernie said anything, but I trust Jane speaks for Bernie and the Sanders family, where she says the sudden and inexplicable loss is so sad. Michael Brooks's work on behalf of justice, humanity, and peace, and his compassionate intelligence was impressive. It will live on through many he inspired, sending love and courage to his family and his many friends. And that was Jane Sanders. Just like a couple hours after his passing, which was of course a beautiful tribute, an absolutely beautiful tribute. So the man was loved. The man was loved by and he was acknowledged by so many, like big names, quote unquote, small names, quote unquote. Everyone sort of knew him, right? Like everyone sort of knew him, and and knew of his impact, and that's the goal we should all strive for in a lot of ways, I guess, right? Like to be remembered and to for doing good, for doing good. Yes, Cynthia saying like would I open my show to do more world politics? It's certainly something I'm looking into. I mean, right now I'm in a bit of a challenging position where, like, with daycares closed, I have very little time to work on videos, and I have to find topics and work them into videos very quickly. Often I have seconds or minutes to think about a video, to gather my thoughts and record it. Otherwise, I could not make videos. Because my wife, Brianna, who's often a guest on the stream, she still has, like, she works from home mostly. She's fortunate that she can. But she still has to work her full-time 40-hour-a-week job. And the daycares are closed. So for most of the day, I'm the primary caregiver to our son. Right? So I fit my video making around his naps, around the days where Brianna's free enough that I can make a video in the morning. On weekends, I try to catch up on making videos. And that makes it hard for me, especially to make videos about topics that require a bit more research, because I just don't have time. So for now, I'm sort of in a holding pattern, right? I'm sort of in a holding pattern of trying to keep the channel relevant and alive until I can actually devote time again. You know, before the daycares closed, I had, you know, a regular work day available to me, and I just don't have that right now. The daycares might open up again. Tentatively, we're looking at maybe opening up in early September, but that's not a guarantee yet. We're not sure. So that's where we're sort of at there. Brennan, I did see your comment. If you want to drop it again so we could speak to it, I did see it, but I think I was in the middle of a thought. Let me know again. Not to say that I was ignoring it, of course, but I do want to see that. Yeah. Doug Ford is certainly, there's been like a power grab. It's hard though to say, because at the end of the day, he has a majority. To what degree is the power grab a formality, right? Like, you know, the issue is that we have a broken electoral system that gave Doug Ford absolute power with 40% of the vote. Yeah, I mean, with Canadian politics and such, like I want to do more CanCon again, but it's also finding the time to do videos. And you know, when I made Canadian videos, like, the thing is, YouTube prioritizes the big news networks, and I find that with Canadian news, that's even stronger because the field is smaller. And so I found that whenever I would make a video, even if it performed well, it just wouldn't get shown to anybody outside my core audience. So I would make very well engaged videos on important Canadian topics that would get 700 views. And like, I'm trying to build a channel that covers issues I find important, but also, like, I'm trying to build a channel that can sustain an income. And that's something that I'm working towards, right? And it's about trying to find that balance. And one of the things that, again, has been slowed down by the COVID-19 issue is I am starting a podcast, and it's something I've been working on for months, with another person, which will have as its focus Canadian content. Because I feel that YouTube is so much based on scale, and I do not have the size of channel where I can make Canadian content consistently that generates scale. My videos on Jagmeet Singh, no matter how well they perform, will never get shown ahead of videos by the CBC or CTV or a 55-view video by the Toronto Star. American news bubbles are so big that independent news can fit through the cracks. The Canadian YouTube audience, at least except unless you're going to go into far-right conspiracy, is totally gobbled up by the big news networks. I mean, David Dole will get viewed, but David Dole started his channel at a time before the algorithm changed such that you could grow a very large channel. Organic growth is slow on YouTube. So that's something I'm looking at, is finding a way to do more Canadian content in a manner that it fits the format. And so I think podcasting is a better place to do Canadian content. Also, one thing I tend to do more Canadian content in is my writing. Again, also because of the daycares being closed, I don't have time for writing as much as I did. But my writing is almost exclusively on Canadian issues. I've written for Passage. I've written for all these sorts of left publications and mainstream publications. And I want to get back to doing more writing, again, once I have more free time. It's not with David, no. I don't want to say who it's with in case it falls through, and then I want that person to be embarrassed. But no, it's not with David Dole. No, it's not with David Dole. Not that I wouldn't want to do one with David Dole. It's just, we have it's just not a project we're working on together. The podcast name is tentatively going to be Left Turn Canada. It's a reference to an old CCF book by MJ Coldwell. So Left Turn. We were thinking of nodding to the left. It's not going to be a history podcast necessarily. It's mostly going to be what happened this week in Canada type thing. This is just it's a book kind of chronicling what the Canada would look like under the CCF. Seeing on conspiracy content. I always wondered if I just went away for a while and just was just grifted for made a Dave Rubin channel, how much money it could be made. And if I would get a call from the Koch brothers, George Soros has not sent me a single check. Not yet, at least. Yeah, so we're tentatively looking at that. We've thought of some topics we might talk about. It's something we really want to do, but again, it's just everything's crazy right now for a lot of people, right? Myself, the people I'm working with, and of course my spouse and their spouse. All of that is causing issues. It's sort of like a manifesto, but it's like a book written in advance of an election. More of a manifesto would have been Make This Your Canada. Look up Make This Your Canada by David Lewis and Frank Scott. That's more of a book-length manifesto of what you might expect the CCF to run on, their vision of society. That's more of the manifesto. We also thought about maybe having our title Make This Your Canada, but I think we wanted the word left in there. So if people looked up Canada and left, our podcast would show up. If they wanted left-wing Canadian podcasts, it might be better. It might be better suited. Yeah, Brandon sees. Yeah, my brother. So Brandon says, my brother lost two of his best friends 2 months before COVID-19. One on December 26th and one in late January. Then on April 26th, we lost our dad from COVID-19. Brandon, that's awful. My sincere condolences. Sorry I didn't see the full comment and I wasn't able to get to it. But no, that's awful. And it shows that this is a serious illness. It's a serious pandemic, epidemic, right? That is affecting people in serious ways. And it's affecting young people, it's affecting older people, it's affecting all sorts of folks. And I think what's really disorienting about it is that, say, unlike like Ebola, where a lot of people, if you got it, you were almost certainly going to get severely ill. With COVID, it's such a capricious disease where some people will get it, otherwise healthy young people even in some cases, and pass away. And then some people have gotten COVID-19 and don't even know it. There are some people that were fully asymptomatic for their entire illness period. They didn't even get minor flu-like symptoms. Nothing. That's why this, like, Dr. Fauci was writing saying that he's never seen something like this. That affects otherwise similar people so differently, so seemingly randomly as this illness. Like, one healthy 20-year-old doesn't know they got it. One healthy 20-year-old is, on their back for a couple days at home. One healthy 20-year-old, is might have to go to the hospital, but is ultimately fine. One healthy 20-year-old it survives, but ends up in the ICU, and then one healthy 20-year-old passes away. And at least as we know, they're all identical. Why? This seems so much more divergent than a lot of illnesses we're dealing with. Yeah, Benji, I think Benji saying here that they worry about an outbreak in BC because the restrictions are being loosened. So here in Canada, we've done a lot better than the States. We not bragging because we've made a lot of mistakes. Specifically, we failed to protect old folks and people living in long-term care facilities, like in old folks' homes and in nursing homes and things like that, where most of the Canadians who did die from COVID died in those houses, in those facilities. And, but we've done better than the United States. And we're starting to reopen, but there's a worry that the reopening could lead to more spikes. I don't know. We'll have to see. The risk of reopening is that you set guidelines, and do people stick to those? So, for instance, if you say to people, okay, we're reopening now, but you can only be in groups of 10. You can only have a bubble of 10 people. So, like if you have a family of 5 and your friends have a family of 5, you 10 can hang out with one another, but no one else. Right? And if you want to go outside that bubble, you should practice social distancing and all of that. Now, the question is going to be, do people stick to 10? Or do they push it? When they say, okay, you can go now in some medium-sized groups in certain indoor spaces, do people stick to groups that are appropriately sized for those spaces? Or do they push it a little bit? And if they push it a little bit, how much of a negative effect does that have? And these are the things we don't know yet, first and foremost. The thing about COVID-19 was until we got a vaccine, we were never, ever going to be able to fully stop it. If we do reopening, it's going to affect people. There's no way around that. It's going to affect folks. And that's not me defending reopening. That's me saying if we as a society choose to reopen, the consequences will be people will get COVID-19 and there will be consequences. The point of flattening the curve, though, was never about eliminating COVID-19 on a global scale without a vaccine. It was about ensuring that at the end of the day, we didn't overwhelm our ICUs, our hospitals. that hospital capacity would not be overwhelmed. And what we're seeing in Texas, Florida, Arizona, other parts of the US, but not in Canada, even, it never got quite that bad. We were lucky, even in Montreal and Toronto. Got close, but didn't get quite that bad, that doctors were starting to run out of hospital beds. And like, there was that horrific story from Texas where the doctor it was on CNN like a couple weeks ago, where he basically said, look, I got 10 spaces, but I got 20 people. And I'm not sure any of those 10 extra people are going to survive without a ventilator. We don't have enough to save their lives. And the reason that's happening is because they didn't clamp down on social distancing protocols hard enough, fast enough, long enough in Texas. That's why. If they had social distancing procedures, people would still get sick. People would still end up in the ICU. But maybe instead of 20 people with 10 spaces, they would have only ever had 7 or 8 people, leaving everyone with the care they needed in that emergency scenario. Orange Man Bad saying here, yes, average age of COVID death in Canada is 83. Yeah, I get it. On average, most people dying from this illness are older. But young people can and have died. Young, otherwise healthy people. It has happened. It's rarer, yes, but it's happened. And in addition to that, it's not just about death. It's also about potential long-term health effects. There's been some indication that this could affect respiratory health longer term. So you might not pass away, but it might also be more serious than you being sick for 3 or 4 days and being better. We're not 100% on those. The point is, the biggest issue was preventing overcapacity in the healthcare system. I mean, no one's ever denied that this is disproportionately affecting elderly folks or people with certain comorbidities. Like if you already have respiratory issues, like it's more likely to affect you than if you're if you're otherwise healthy, right? That's just like, that's the way it is, right? Like if in general, if you are healthy and you're younger, you're less likely to pass away. But if you really do get sick, you're still taking up a hospital space from somebody that might need it more. Okay, Orange Man Bad, look, people are getting sick from this. Florida is getting like 15,000 cases a day, man. This is serious. It's serious stuff. Okay? It's absolutely serious stuff. People are getting sick and they're dying. And they have long-term health issues. It's not a joke. Yeah. It's the case that some people get this, as I noted. I'm not hiding this fact. I don't over-exaggerate the effects of COVID. Some people get this and they don't even notice. That's one of the reasons there's a conspiracy around this. If this was as serious as SARS or Ebola in terms of how it affected everyone that got it, you're damn well right that people would be more serious about it. But COVID-19 is in this sort of uncanny valley of diseases where it's extremely deadly to some of the people that get it, but not at all deadly to others. And that's led to these wild conspiracy theories. It's real. The states that were most invested in the conspiracy theory angle of it are now paying the price. Texas, Arizona, Florida. It's simple as that. Exactly, Peggy Russell. We don't know. We don't know what the long-term effects of getting COVID are. We don't know. Are you further susceptible to other instances of it? I'm not sure. Like, look, Like this is real, guys. And like, look, I'm gonna look this up. Like the argument I've seen from conservatives is like, oh, the death rate isn't going up, right? So it's like COVID cases are rising, but the COVID death rate isn't going up. But like, if you look it up, like, cases are rising, deaths are rising. Like, we're really dealing with it, right? Like, it's we're seeing it a ton, right? And you know, cases aren't slowing down. They're not slowing down fast enough, at least. I'm concerned. It's not a 99.9% recovery rate. The US has not had that kind of recovery rate. You know? The issue is that fundamentally people are dying from this. And don't think for a second that Trump has a vested interest now in trying to downplay certain results. And I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that in some of these states that have aligned with Donald Trump in opposing some of the restrictions, at least at first, they had a rise in pneumonia-related fatalities, which indicates, in some cases, that these states are passing off COVID deaths as other issues to keep the numbers low. Like, we have to remember that Florida, a couple weeks ago, in one day, had more cases than British Columbia did in the entire COVID run. Now, more testing, more positives. That's true, Orange Man Bad. But at least, I haven't checked the data on this particular recently. But in general, a high percentage of positive tests in your testing is a bad thing. The US for a long time had a very high percentage of testing, aka if you were tested, you were very likely to have the illness. Now that sounds good. That sounds just like, oh, our testing is really accurate. We're testing the people that need to be tested because we're getting positives. But actually, the best testing is when very, very few of your people tested actually get it. And so the US is really lagging behind. The United States would have a lower positive test ratio if it did even more testing. The US is still testing people that they're very sure have it, and they're not doing a wide enough community testing to get people that have minor or maybe even no symptoms, which would lower their effective testing result. But yeah, of course, in a sense, more testing does mean more cases, but the US percentage is not low enough. Let me see if I can find that data. Okay, yeah, here's the data through July 2nd, 2020. I'm going to link you guys to this site. This is a good site here. And what it shows is that our world, okay. So what this shows, if you scroll down a little bit to this map, there's a map here. It's like semi-interactive. What it shows is the amount of people tested per getting the case. The redder the number, the more the amount of people tested get cases. So what it says here, to be able to properly monitor the spread of the virus, countries with more widespread outbreaks need to do more testing. So one important way to understand if countries are testing sufficiently is to look at the share of the tests returning a positive result, known as the positive rate. This is shown in the map chart right here. Actually, one sec. This is important, so I'm going to... Okay, I'm going to bring this up. Can people see this? Let me know if people can see this. This is important, so I want to show you guys this. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second to make sure everyone can see it. I'm going to pull this up. Okay. Let me put this right here. Go here. Okay, so this is the map. What it says here, we see enormous differences across countries. Some countries like Australia, South Korea, and Uruguay have a positive test rate of less than 1%. That means it takes hundreds or maybe even thousands of tests to find one positive case of COVID in those countries. Others, such as Mexico and Nigeria, have positive rates of 20 to 50 or even more. These countries, a case is found every few tests. And so it says here, countries with a very high positive rate are unlikely to be testing enough to find all the cases. The WHO says a 3 to 12 as a general benchmark of adequate testing. Now, the US is around 9% here. So if you look at it here, the US is around 9. That is within the benchmark. So the US isn't abjectly failing. Whereas you look at Mexico, Brazil, that means 63% of people tested in Mexico are positive, which basically means they're only catching people that are guaranteed to be sick. Right? Right? They're only catching people that are guaranteed to be sick. And so what this is showing then is that here in Canada, 1% of the people tested are testing positive, which means we are testing far more widely in the country. We are testing beyond the expected cases more and more. If you look to Myanmar, it's 0.1. Greece, it's 0.5. England, 0.6, or the UK, excuse me. Germany, 0.5. Norway, 0.2. South Korea 0.5, Taiwan 0.4, Australia 0.5, New Zealand 0.1, Uruguay again 0.7. What you're seeing then is the countries that are struggling have higher numbers. And the US testing right there at 8 or 9%, right, have a higher rate. And so Orange Man Bad, I think what you're saying is they only test people that present with symptoms, therefore are likely already positive. I get what you're saying, but that's exactly the problem. Because the US actually isn't testing all that much. If they were testing more effectively, their test rate would be lower. If you tested magically, instantly, if you tested every single American, you would find more cases. You would, 100%. You're more tests, more cases. But the percentage of people who had a case would be far lower. And you'd start to get a better sense. South Korea, almost from the beginning, tested like thousands of people. So my point is less that, Cuba's doing very well with this. My point is less that, Cuba, or that the United States is the worst in the world, or my point is less that, you're not right, that if you test more, you'll find more cases, but that until the US shows numbers similar to what most of Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and some of the Asian countries have, in terms of a test rate of 1 to, say, 2%, they're not testing widely enough. And so the US is a bit of an outchart. Yeah. Exactly. That's what Samantha said. The countries in blue, the countries that are darker blue, the darker blue, the better. means that, so basically if you're in blue, you have a maximum of 3%, which means for every for every 100 people you test, only 3 or less will have COVID. The US is at a position where they're almost at about 9 per 100 people tested. So their goal should be to test more, get into the community to get better contact tracing, and that's going to require testing beyond the core people. The US has not done that, either because they don't want to spend the money, or because people don't trust that they won't get billed for something, or the US has poor health infrastructure, or in some places there's a conspiracy theory aversion to getting tested. I've seen some state representative in Ohio posted something on Facebook last week, I believe, which said basically, if we all stop getting tested, there won't be any more cases. Don't get tested. Don't wear a mask. Don't get tested. And so, of course, if elected officials are saying that, at least somebody's going to listen. Like, look, none of us are hoping for people to die. Like, some people are like, oh, you want the spikes to happen. But it's like, we realize that there's an inevitability here. 3 or 4 weeks ago now, I forget when, but 3 or 4 weeks ago now, Ron DeSantis was giving an interview or a press conference. I can't remember. He was speaking to some media, and he basically said, oh, everyone's scaremongered about COVID coming to Florida, that we were going to be like New York, blah, 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 blah. It's not coming here. It's all overblown. And then like 2 weeks after that, Florida was absolutely inundated. Right? And there does come a point where like medical capacity starts to struggle. Right? Right? And at those points, you might find yourself at a tipping point where the death rate starts to increase, both in percentages and therefore in raw numbers. When ICUs start getting full and things like that, that's when it's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, and like... Sanwal asks, have you heard of Vijay Prashad? He is an communist Indian historian. It would be great to have you both discuss global left history if you can get him on. Actually, I mean, the name sounds familiar, Sanwal, but not deeply familiar. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, I'd always be interested in guests that go beyond, the Canadian-American bubble from time to time, that talk about global issues. So yeah, I mean, I can certainly look them up and see if, like, we would have a commonality in chatting about stuff. But yeah, thanks for the suggestion. And people saying he was on the last TMBS. Oh, that's... Whew. I mean, that's... Going from Michael to Christo is a bit of a downgrade, especially being one of Michael's last guests. Whew. That's a tough act to follow. Whew. Fourth Radical says, Christo, there was an excellent chart in the New York Times showing the divergence between expected increases in positives as a result of increases in testing and the actual increases, which was much more. Okay, that's interesting. What was the did they give a reason, Fourth Radical, for that? Was there like a hypothesis for why? I mean, they are moving very fast. They are moving very fast on vaccines, and that is encouraging. That is encouraging. And so far, their initial testing has been quick. Like, there's a lot of international collaboration on it, and I'm optimistic they are going to make a vaccine in record time. But like Orange Man Bad is saying, it takes a long time generally, and so they might still need time. It might take longer than the hopes take. I mean, look, here's the thing about Trump supporters. Like, when this was happening, like at the start, and they polled people about social distancing, and they polled people about shutting the economy down, and like, was it something that was like no one wanted it, but like, did people recognize it as like something that needed to happen for the good of everybody? Most Americans polled said yes. And while there were more Republicans, more Trump supporters that were reluctant to socially distance and close the economy, even Trump supporters agreed. And so for the most part, most Trump voters, not talking about people that are Trump activists online, not talking about like the hardcore Trump base, but people that voted for Trump once and might still vote for them again, a lot of those people still recognize this as real. They do. Even a lot of Trump voters do. Justin asks, what are your unfiltered thoughts on Rising with Crystal and Sagar? Hope you're well. Justin, hope you're well as well. It's a great question. I'm just going to grab some water. I'll be right back, and I'll get to that question. So, like, my views on Crystal and Sagar's show is that, like, I get the premise of it. Like, for those who don't know, the premise is Crystal and Sagar are both representing, like, alternative viewpoints in politics. Crystal's an alternative on the left, Sagar on the right. Like, neither of them are traditional quote-unquote Democrats and or Republicans. And as such, they're both giving you a different perspective on the news that you would get, say, either on Fox, hypothetically, or on MSNBC. But I find that Sagar, while in some issues he's not necessarily a traditional conservative, I find that, like, you can sort of find someone like Sagar already, and that's Tucker Carlson on Fox. And also, whereas Crystal Ball truly is, even though she's not perfect, there really isn't anybody like her on MSNBC, NBC, things like that. Like Chris Hayes is decent. He's not like Crystal Ball, for instance. I like Crystal a lot more than Sagar. I feel like she would just be better with her own show. I feel like Sagar does far too much to paper over the real dangers of the populist right, of what he calls the populist right. And I find that sometimes Crystal doesn't do enough to push back. Sometimes. I really like Crystal Ball, but I like her better on social media, and I liked her better, and I've said this before, during the primaries, when she was on like MSNBC as like a pro-Bernie surrogate. And she was still very cutting and very frank and very passionate and very sharp and very quick. All of the things that a lot of people like her for on Rising. But I felt she was even better in that format. Like, you know, I feel like some of Sagar's views legitimize some troubling things from my perspective. Like, you know, that's my view. I like, you know, one thing I like Crystal stuff. Sometimes she's too critical of identity politics, not in the sense that like you can't criticize them, but I feel like I feel the way she talks about it is it gives too much, concedes too much to Sagar's side. Like it, whereas I think she should push back a little bit and say that, like, yeah, it is true that corporations are disingenuous about like symbolism around like changing Aunt Jemima and a sports team name. But like that symbolism does matter to people. And the reason those symbols have endured is because they matter. And so, yeah, you can call out the disingenuousness of corporations, but identity and perception does matter. Not everything is purely materialistic. You know what I mean? And I say that as somebody who is primarily like a creator that looks at things through class. Not exclusively, not to the exclusion of gender and sexuality. As you guys know, I've covered issues on race and gender and sexuality on this channel before. It's something that I try to do my best on, knowing that, as somebody who doesn't come from a marginalized community, I don't have that full perspective, but I do my best. So, yeah. Like, so I mean, yeah. So I like Crystal. I do. I like her. I've never interacted with her really. Like, I don't think she follows me on Twitter. I've never been on the Hill, and I've never been on any I've never been on a show with her before. So I can't say anything about her on a personal basis, obviously, because I don't know her in that way. But I mean, like, yeah, like I said, I'm a fan of her on social media, and when she does like other appearances, maybe more than I am on her own show. New polling out, Trudeau's approval ratings down pretty heavy. But bad for Conservatives in any case here in Canada, for those Canadians who don't know. Jagmeet Singh, the most popular leader in Canada right now. But no one really popular. Conservatives all incredibly unpopular, if you look at this. Scheer is the outgoing Conservative leader, and you could probably see why. Minus 34. These McKay and O'Toole are the two main challengers to replace him, both negative 11 and 12. Trudeau at plus 3, Blanchette, but he's only running in Quebec plus 4, and Singh plus 4. Singh is the leader of the party we like. I mean, none of this is to throw people away. I mean, I don't think Sagar is part of the left. Some of his views, I think like, to some degree, it's like, yeah, you have to build broad coalitions, but you also have to, like, know who you are. Like, Crystal is part of the left. I believe that. Even if I disagree with her, I don't think Sagar is. Although, you can work with people on issues. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to see them as a comrade and an ally day to day. There's a difference. There are opportunities for cooperation, and there are people you actually build, like, strategies with. So, for instance, Bernie Sanders could build a movement with people, whether we would have loved it given how she treated him or not. Like, Bernie Sanders' goal was to build a movement with people like Liz Warren and, like, people like that. That was his goal. But on an issue-by-issue basis, Bernie could work with very conservative Republicans like Mike Lee on limiting the president's ability to unilaterally launch expansionist wars, basically. And so Bernie and Mike Lee, on multiple occasions, worked together against Donald Trump. A very, very far-right senator, and, or maybe, I don't even know, very, very far right, but a very conservative senator and the most left-wing senator found common ground. But it doesn't mean that Mike Lee and Bernie should be in the same party. And that's the difference. So yeah, are there issues where Sagar and Christo can agree and, could push a policy individually, yeah. Should Sagar and Crystal Ball run for president with one as vice president and the other as president? No, that's ridiculous. No, I know he's not a leftist, but the point is some people are like, oh, you're putting ideological purity ahead of alliance, some people would say, and like bringing in Sagar. Well, I'm like, Sagar's not the left, right? Sagar's not the left. Sagar doesn't pretend to be the left. He's on the right. He identifies as such. That's the whole conceit of the show. Cynthia's asking what's happening with the Canadian Green Party. Well, right now they're going through a leadership race. The Green Party in Canada is small. Like the Green Party in the U.S., it's small, but it's much bigger than the U.S. Green Party. In our 5-party system, we have 5 parties that have seats in our federal parliament. So the equivalent would be in the House of Representatives, you would have 5 parties represented in the 435 seats instead of just one, 2 parties. And so the Green Party has 3 seats in Canada's parliament, and they're going through a leadership election. This is a big deal because the Green Party has not had a leadership election in more than a decade, and they have not had a leadership election since they actually became a real party. And that's not to insult the Green Party before, but until 2011, the Greens had never ever won a seat in Parliament. So they weren't represented as like a real party. And so now they have lots of seats in various provincial, they have lots of seats at the provincial level. They have and they have 3 seats in Parliament. And they're the official opposition in Prince Edward Island, Canada's smallest province, but still. And so this is their first big leadership race. And there's a lot of people running, but we're not necessarily, I don't have a sense for polling. I don't know if polling's been done. I know that there's lots of people who are running. Right now, I think there are still technically one... I still think there's like 6 or 7 people running. In general, the party leadership currently wants to keep a status quo ideologically. Like they want the Green Party to sort of remain an eco-capitalist party. On some issues to be left-leaning, on some issues to be right-leaning. Mostly be like a centrist eco-bourgeois party. But there are a couple people running, like Dimitri Lascaris, who are running on a on an openly left-wing platform, which would put them more in line with the NDP, and some issues maybe even further left, some issues not quite, but to basically create an eco-left party in Canada. And so that's their goal. They think that there's an opportunity because the NDP isn't green enough and they could win some of the eco-left vote that's currently with the NDP. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think there's been any polling done. But I'm not sure what's happening. My instinct is that the party will align behind a neoliberal. The vote is October 4th. The vote is October 4th. It's 1 member, 1 vote. So the entire party gets to vote. If you're a member of the party by a certain date, I'm not sure. You will get to vote. So I think it says here, you have to be a member of the Green Party by 11:59 p.m. on September 3rd to vote. The actual vote is October 3rd. I would not leave the NDP for any of these people. No. Even Dimitri Lascaris, who I very much respect, I wouldn't leave the NDP. I wouldn't. Although what I will say is that with the if the Green Party was to make a more strident turn to the left, I would be more open, and I suspect more NDPers would be more open to discussing a merger of the two parties. A more formalized partnership between the NDP and the Greens. Not a guarantee that it would happen, but that could happen, and that could build like a more, like, the Green Party itself it's sort of neoliberal, and not all their voters are left-wing, but you could build a very interesting coalition of workers and of environmentalists and of activists and of intellectuals if you merge the NDP and the Greens. The concern is the Greens as they are right now are too economically neoliberal, even for an NDP that I feel is often not left-wing enough. But I think if a Lascaris-led NDP was Greens came about, there'd be increased calls for a merger. So, I mean, because last year, again, back when the channel was small, I made a video on why, because there was an argument made in Maclean's that if the NDP and the Greens merged, they could actually, and all they didn't grow any, but they just kept the vote they had. The NDP combined with the Green vote, they would end up with about a quarter of the vote, and their vote would become stronger too, because they would have more diversity in the regions. So, like, the NDP and the Greens together in the Maritimes could really start to pick up seats, because both, like, the Greens are strongest in the Maritimes, and that the Greens who waste votes in much of the rest of the country, their votes could be added to the NDP to help the NDP Green merger win more seats. So, like, that would be the argument. But ideologically, I'm in opposition to it, but that could change with new leadership. I'm not holding my breath, but it could change. Like some people have argued, like Alex Tyrell, who was, I don't know if he is anymore, but Alex Tyrell was, when he entered the race, he was the leader of the, Quebec Greens. And he argued that when Elizabeth May, when he dropped out, that Elizabeth May was meddling in the election, that the current leader of the Green Party was essentially putting her thumb on the scale to try to keep the party neoliberal in that regard. And whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't have proof, of course. But that's his argument. So he doesn't want to legitimize the process. So some people are already saying that the process is less than fair. And initially, Dimitri Lascaris was actually blocked from running and had to appeal the decision to the party to reverse it. But at first, they weren't going to let him run. So my suspicion is that Elizabeth May likely has a neoliberal favorite or two that she wants to see win and would not want to see someone like Lascaris win. Yeah, right now in BC, if the polls are to be believed, it looks like the Greens will probably keep their seats. Like, the Greens won't, like, get obliterated in seat count, but the NDP will win a majority government, and so the partnership, the Greens will sort of lose that power. But, of course, the election is still a little bit of ways away, and politics are super volatile right now. But in general, the BC NDP is rightfully getting good credit for how they've handled the COVID crisis. Out of all the big provinces, BC has handled it by far the best. Some of the smaller maritime provinces have done really well, but I feel like those are different comparisons. The Maritimes don't have as many international airports, and they don't have the population density that, say, BC, Ontario, Alberta, and Quebec have. Well, Bob, I mean, the argument for the Greens, like, being fully left would be like, they would be like the NDP on social and economic issues, but they would be more authentically environmentalist. And the argument is that from a lot of NDPers now rank environment issues as among their most important. Like, climate change is a fundamental issue now for the left, in addition to social and economic issues. So the hope would be they could poach votes from the NDP. I mean, that's the argument. I'm not sure if it would work, that's the argument. But I also think Elizabeth May, beyond strategy, she is not a left-winger. She's not. She's very much more or less a centrist type, right? And so I think she's like, I built the Green Party in a certain way, and I want my image to be reflected in the party going forward. Yeah, May's not left wing enough from my perspective. But it is what it is. It is what it is. She has a certain vision for her party. And I get her point, but I still think it's like, look, you're retiring as leader. Like, if you want to be clear, make an endorsement, which she, often, sometimes it's seen as gauche to, make an endorsement of somebody as your outgoing leader, but make an endorsement and campaign for that person openly. So guys, just, we usually wrap up 10:15, 10:30. I'm a little tired. It's been a long day here. So I am going to wrap up. Before I go, I just want to, of course, say thank you. I want to just underline again that, Michael meant so much to a lot of us. Again, as so many people noted to me before, but certainly since his passing, he was a key reason a lot of you found this channel. And he was an influence on how I do content, and he was an influence on so many of us. We're going to miss him so much, not only as a person, maybe especially as a person, but also as a lesson for how to do left politics and left journalism and left analysis. And, I hope that we can continue to remember him. I hope that, the TMBS channel can continue on and do the great work they're doing. But I want to underline again that we're really going to miss him. We're really going to miss him. Before I go, again, I dropped the Discord link in the channel. You can see the Discord link. Join the Discord. It's a great source. John says, can you do an ASMR live stream? John, I don't know how much interest there is in that. And I don't know if I'm the type to do ASMR, but I guess I'll consider it, maybe. I don't know. Probably not, John. Probably not. But for those who want to support the channel, again, there are multiple ways you can do so. The most important way is to, just watch and engage with the content. I have a couple videos up from earlier today after the stream. If you want to go over and click those, that would be really great. For people that have the ability to support financially and the desire, I mean, a lot of people were so generous tonight with their super chats, but, you can support the channel over at PayPal. For more recurring donations, there's becoming a channel member, and there's also donating via Patreon. I know not everyone has the means to do that, but again, what really matters most is that every Wednesday night you guys are here, and so many of you consistently engage with the content. So I very much appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. And let's all take a lesson from Michael, over the next week, but also going forward. That, let's be kinder to one another. Let's work to build left-wing communities. Let's keep an eye to the world, but let's also engage locally. Guys, thank you so much. I'll see you next week. And stay safe and stay happy.